Hello, Salt Strong and Fish Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like diamonds.
And Luke Simons, like diamonds, of course.
There it is. Nailed it. Man, this is going to be a good one already. Starting off strong. For those of you watching on the YouTube, hello. Make sure to go check us out on iTunes as well. Subscribe. Please give us a review. Let us know how we're doing. And if you're listening to us on a podcast, either iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play or any of these crazy new podcast avenues that we're on, make sure to subscribe to us and then check us out on YouTube as well. You can see Luke and I talking and all our funny antics, etc. Thank you guys for all the support. Both the YouTube channel and the podcast is growing like crazy. And Luke and I were talking the last few days. I feel like I am in La La Land because we have been on back-to-back 12-hour fishing trips, offshore fishing trips. First day was a little bit rough, and I just feel like I got literally beat up. I got a mad respect for anyone who's out, 70-plus miles every day like some of these guys are. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But we talked about, one, we've always took a ton of footage. We're filming a red snapper mastery course. And two, like, hey, just let's get on the podcast and video and talk about all the stuff we learned. We had Captain Dylan Hubbard, who we're out fishing with Hubbard's Marina, on recently. And I think he's done it since he was like 10 years old. He's been on the water, and he takes some of this stuff for granted. And so we're going to talk about our perspective on all the things that we learned and some pretty cool stuff. I mean, I just saw our improvement, right, Luke, from day one to day two. I mean, I felt like confidence level was sky high. Like we were like in the zone that second day.
Yeah, I mean, and just small stuff too. It's obviously we've done a lot of inshore fishing, and it is surprising how much different the offshore is. And just like anything, right? It's usually like a lot of little small things will combine to make a really big difference. And yeah, as far as fish catching and just the catching, reeling them up with less effort. Some little tips that I just picked up that was a surprising big difference. I'm so sore. The first day I realized that I was kind of holding the rod the wrong way, and which was just making it just take more energy than it could have otherwise. So we'll talk about that. Also, even just some bait rigging tips. Just again, some small things make a huge difference. And I think that's a big reason why we caught so many fish compared to what we used to do back in the day when we used to go out on our own. Yeah, we catch some, but they were mostly just like, small sea bass and stuff. And we really didn't catch anything small out there.
No.
These past couple of trips. Like toward the end, I was literally like, please don't be another red snapper, because they do not stop fighting. They fight all the way up to the surface. We were in almost like 200 feet of water for a lot of the time. And it was a lot of work reeling those things up.
Yeah, I was going to take my shirt off for this, but I decided not to, just to show all the bruises underneath my armpit. Right. My gosh, that rod butt was just killing me towards the end. And of course, you had a brand new, super light 2019. What was it? Accurate reel. That thing was so smooth. I tried yours out for that one. I was like, oh my gosh, this is night and day. And I had the old school, like, cheapo Bass Pro. Golly, that thing was so heavy. It weighed it was like fishing with an extra dumbbell. But once again, it's part of the learning curve. And just so you know, our background, I mean, Luke and I grew up fishing. Our dad always had at least one, if not two, boats at any given time. And we had a 24-foot well craft that we used and abused off South Daytona, where we had a little condo growing up. And I remember going out there, and I remember sea bass was like the thing, and we go find some public wrecks, which did fine. And even Dylan talks about, I mean, you can kill it on some of these public wrecks out there in reefs and in springs that are marked. And I don't ever remember catching big stuff like that. Occasionally we might get a big king mackerel.
I remember we caught one amberjack, and we were super pumped. It was and it wasn't huge. It was maybe I think 15, 20 pounds. And that was to my remembrance, that was one of the biggest fish that we caught. Yeah. It was rare that we got keeper grouper.
Speaking of amberjack, let's show that picture for those of you who were.
Yeah, it's a beast.
Can you see that?
Yeah. Beast of an amberjack.
Yeah, and it's on YouTube now, the whole video. I was hoping that was going to be a big grouper, dude, because our boy Rich, right next to Anthony, had that really nice grouper on. And I was like, oh man, if this is a grouper, this is going to be a beast. Still was a beast, but man, that was crazy. I don't think I ever could have pulled that thing up. I mean, you see him, like how much energy it took just to get him off the bottom.
Yeah, I'm literally glad I did not hook into that thing. That thing was the giant.
I think we probably did. Remember, we were all getting broken off there.
Yeah, I got totally owned by a few fish out there at that spot. But yeah, so I say first thing. So we went out with them. We've been out with them a few times now, with some courses and even just for fun trips. And the first thing, just as far as like lessons learned, the number one thing, my first time I went, I took a spinning rod, and because that's the rod I use for like tarpon, and it's like a 6,000 size reel, and had like 30-40 pound braid on there. I was like, yeah, this is what I should be using. And they like really like literally laughed. They started ragging on me right away, and I didn't realize why, obviously, but using a reel like this, when you get those big fish on, the part of the efficiency on reeling these big fish in is to use the actual side of the boat as a lever. And if we can, I don't know if we can overlay the footage of that amberjack catch, but you can see that in full display, where Captain Anthony was literally just using the butt of his rod and on his armpit, and then putting the bottom part of the reel on the actual edge of the boat, just to get a total lever system. So he was using his body weight instead of like his arm muscle. So these reels, these traditional overhand reels, you can put the actual reel on the boat without impacting your line, right? The spinning rod, your line is underneath. So if you try that, the line is going to be totally toast. So these are total game changers. These are really a necessity if you're going to be bottom fishing for big fish. The spinning tackle, again, I learned it the hard way. I used it for a half day, and then we were catching red snapper again, and I was just getting totally owned because I literally had to be, using my arms for the entire fight, and it's just not as efficient as what it could be.
Yeah, and I'm noticing how much easier it is on those just to power down as soon as you get that hit and just get them off the bottom really, really quickly. And it seemed like in the beginning, something I learned, I was used to fighting like having a big tarpon or a snook on where I'm doing a lot of pumping. And when you got a fish that's down, 150 to 200 feet, I mean, there's an enormous amount of pressure down there. And every time you're pumping and getting in just a little bit of loose, of a loose line in there, it's opening up the hole a little bit. And all of a sudden, I kept losing fish left and right. And I was like, what the heck? And I saw Tony, Tony was getting the brunt of it because he missed like 3 in a row. And that's a big no-no. We love you, Tony. But he was doing that too. He was doing these little pumps. And every time you do that pump, and you got so much line going down and so much pressure, it was like, boom, in one instant, boom, that fish is just gone. That was what I stopped doing.
And the fact that the boat was rocking is pretty rough out there. So, I mean, in reality, the waves were kind of doing some like pretty good pumps for you. And if you happen to do a downturn pump as the boat was going down, I mean, that's going to be like just total slack that fish can use to get off, especially if you're using braid. There's really not the stretch factor that'll keep it buttoned up. So yeah, that was a total game. And so rule number one, Rich is a character out there. And
I got it right here on the phone if we want to play it.
Last thing, 3 platinum rules out here.
3 platinum rules.
Captain's always right. This is what we do for a living. And crank it, don't yank it already. Oh yeah, you're always right.
The crank it, don't yank it. That's all about literally crank the handle, don't yank the rod up. And that was, because again, especially with grouper, or anything that just wants to get you back down, under a ledge and which will break you off. You need to take every split second on just on getting that rod up. And there's no better way than just to reel as fast as you can.
And speaking of fast, what I saw day one, Nick, tricky little Nick. So if you guys don't know, we're doing a 2-day back-to-back 12 hours of deep sea fishing, trying to get as many red snapper and document all the tips and tactics that these guys are using. And day one, we took the team. Carol, God bless her, she took one for the team and she stayed back because we sold like 1,200 packs of Z-Man hooks and some soft plastics over the weekend. It was nuts. So she stayed back, but Nick was sitting there in the back corner, and he literally was waiting. And the second we were, we put the anchor down, and the second it was in position and he hit a little horn, Nick was like dropping down, and Nick was always catching like the first big fish. So we all started doing that. We're all like trying to beat each other and get it down as quick as possible. And his rule number 2 was like, hey, we do this for a living. We're out in the water every day. You might want to listen to us. And that second day, Rich is watching me. He's like, Joe, slow it down. And so I slowed down. He's like, no, even more. I was like, what? I was like, I'm trying to get down there, dude. He's like, no, like slow it down. Like, he's like, stop it. And I'm like in the middle of the water column, like I'm not even halfway down yet. And all of a sudden I'm getting like some legit strikes. And that was when we catching those beeliners. Let me see if I could pull up one of the, I got one here. Of course, I'm long arming that thing a little bit, but that was massive. And those are like 20, that was a 21 or 22 inch. Do you have yours, Luke?
Yeah, we got they got them up to 24 inches, which was by far the biggest. It was vermilion snapper, also called beeliners. Giants, and like even online, that was a picture I was going to pull up. Yeah, even online, they don't have a. We were actually like the captains were kind of freaking out, and so when they were like really excited about, like, that's when I was like these are legit fish, because these guys were out there day in day out. They were saying they'd never even seen them like that. And so online on the doing some search for like the record in Florida, there unfortunately isn't. They're not tracking those, but they basically said they can get potentially up to 24 inches, and that was like literally the size we were catching. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, but why we're mentioning this is we were catching all these massive beeliners in the middle of the water column. They weren't down at the bottom. And so, I mean, he was right. He knew that area. And he's like, man, just slow it down and wait for a strike. He's like, if you don't get one, then keep going all the way down. But like, give it a second there. And, that 100 or so foot range versus going all the way down to 200. And that we were that second day. And we started killing it. And let me tell you, it's a whole lot better reeling up for 100 than 200. I mean, they're still going to start going down, but man, when you have what was it, 8 ounce? No, what we're using for weight?
6 ounces is what I had at least.
And you're fighting a massive snapper that wants to take you down to the bottom as quick as possible. I mean, it like I said, I have kudos to all you offshore fishermen that are doing that all day long. I was beat up.
Yeah, but for going slow, though, it really depends on what you're going for, because the snapper species, and it was Dylan did an excellent job and on the part of the course where it's about reading the depth finder, which is super important, where he explains how you can tell what fish is what, right, from just looking at a lot of the depth finder readings, and in many cases the red snapper, and he'll show some really good examples, and that spot in particular is around 200 feet. And there was like a Christmas tree pattern on the actual on the depth finder, and it was literally from, I would say, from all the way up to maybe 100, even further up, there were some fish being marked, and he was basically like, hey, those are red snapper, and sure enough, like that's where we were catching a bunch of red snapper in the middle column, and then toward the end those vermilions came in. We even caught a couple red snapper on the while trying to catch tuna, just totally freelining some baits off the back. So those red snapper were literally coming all the way up to the surface. But the grouper aren't going to do that. And those grouper are typically going to be further down. And so once I was getting just totally worn out from those red snapper, I was purposely trying to just shoot my line down. So I was going as fast as I possibly could to get through those snapper before they got it. And that's when I started catching triggerfish and some other species. So it was really cool to start to learn, okay, like, some fish are going to be in the middle column and you can slow down to get those. But if you don't want to get them, you can just rocket one down, and it got past them most of the time.
Yeah. And speaking of the different depths for different types of fish, let's talk about the baits, right? I was just like, oh man, we're going to be able to throw anything down there and get strikes. And that was pretty much true once we're in the good spot. But it was interesting that different baits were attracting the different fish. It's like, all right, if I want to catch, X fish, I'm going to put a squid on it. I'm going to put, a little strip of squid or whatever it might be. Octopus. What else do we have?
We had octopus. We had squid
strips.
We had threadfin, and just frozen threadfin. Some live fish.
Yeah.
We've got that bonita, so had cut a bonita.
Oh yeah, those bonita strips are pretty good too.
Oh man, like literally. But what was interesting is I don't know, and I'm sure it depends on day to day, but literally everything we threw down. I just did an experiment where I'll do a different one and throw it down, catch a red snapper. Then I switch to an octopus, throw it down, catch a red snapper. Throw a bonita strip down, catch a red snapper. And once I went to squid and I went to small, I really decreased the size. And once I did that, that's when I started catching some. I don't know if you can see it, but that's a nice trigger fish. You just looking at them. Do you see it, Joe?
Yeah.
Yeah, but just looking at them, their anatomy, right? They have that small mouth. So a big old chunk of squid is going to be a little bit more difficult for them to get and actually get hooked. So I was using a little small chunk of it and just hammering, just flying it down past those red snapper, get it on the bottom, and eventually one of those will pick it up. And then we ended up limiting out that day, and those are I'm going to cook some tonight, but supposedly they're delicious.
Yeah, we got some big ones.
It's
cool to learn about. I didn't know why they were called triggerfish. Did you?
Yeah, I'd heard that before. I've never actually seen it in action.
It's pretty cool.
Yep.
So you basically hit that top or the second little, I don't know, I guess it's a little small dorsal, and then bop, the main one goes down. Kind of cool.
Yeah, pretty slick.
Huh. Learned something new every day. The other thing I learned is don't wear flip-flops. Our boy Jake wearing flip-flops. Luckily, nothing happened to him, but day 2, they had one of the lines out there with the steel leader and some treble hooks out, and the treble hook like literally got caught in Dylan's boot. I mean, the point he had to take the entire boot off, and it would have been like in his leg had he not had the boot on it. Went rubber boot and had to get pliers to pull it out. And so, yeah, if you're going offshore fishing, don't wear flip-flops.
Yeah, especially on those party boats too. There's a lot of lines out. Because the captains were talking, and like they, I won't say cringe, but they get kind of nervous when they see people with flip flops, because that's just an extra liability for them to have to worry about. It's just easier to get injured when you don't have protective coverings around the feet.
Yeah, I mean, you got all kinds of lines, you got hooks, you got fish being flopped in the boat and going all over the place. Yeah, so that was another big one.
So yeah, no spinning rods and no flip flops as far as things not to bring.
The other one, I mean, and this is, I think this is kind of a gray area, but when they have a packed out boat, they prefer that people don't have a lot of braided line, just because it makes a complete mess with tangles. But you were using it. I mean, the feel was so much different compared to, me. I was just 100% mono on what I was using. Thoughts there? Because you did both. Still there, Lukey?
I mean, you can feel everything. Like even, yeah, can you hear me?
Oh yeah, I got you back now.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So, I personally prefer braid, just because you can feel everything better. But again, there are a lot of benefits to the mono. The bad thing about braid, right, in that rocking boat, as that boat is going down, there's no stretch in the line. So as soon as that boat's going down, if you're not careful, there can get slack in the line, and that fish is gone. So I did lose a couple of fish, which I think the first day was much more rough, so it was a bigger factor. But I suppose the mono, they definitely recommend mono for going after the big grouper and like that big amberjack that was caught on mono. It's just easier to stay hooked up to a fish. And as far as abrasion, which we now know after doing these tests, is that if a fish gets you rocked and braid is touching the sharp edges of a rock, it's toast. It's totally gone. And mono has a much better chance of wearing through some abrasion if a fish does get you down in the structure. So even though I was using braid, and I personally would not have done this, but they did a pretty big, it's called a top shot. So it's a string of mono that's above your weight and swivel, and not just like 2 feet. It was probably about 10 to 15 feet of I think it was 50 pound, maybe 40 or 50 pound mono that was connecting my braid to the swivel, which was where the weight was. And then from there to the hook was another like 3 or 4 feet. So again, that way, if a fish does rock me, I have that extra abrasion way above the weight, and also there's more stretch, right? That's at least 15 feet of stretch in that mono. And so they actually recommend to even go longer than that in many cases. So that was something I never heard of before.
Yep. And also too, what we forgot on the baits, I mean, that massive grouper that Rich caught was off a jig. It wasn't not the diamond jig. What was that jig he had called?
It was I can't remember the name of it, but it was the type of jig that kind of flutters down. I think it's called a butterfly jig.
Yeah, that's
And so you don't even have to have live or cut bait. You can those jigs can be real effective. And Anthony caught some really nice snapper on that the first part of the first trip. He was hammering those big fish on those jigs as well.
And what looked like a bass rod and reel.
Yeah, that was a big grouper. That was a giant grouper.
Golly.
Unfortunately, it was not grouper season.
Yeah, that was nuts. Yeah, in terms of like those guys too, and I did a bad job day one because I think, you try to go out there and you try to, oh, I'm a fisherman, I know what I'm doing. And I did not ask as many questions. And then day two, it was just you and I, the team had left. And I'm really picking their brains. And that was when we did that funny video where he's like, guys, like, this is what we do for a living. He's like, I want to get the biggest tip possible, meaning I want you to catch as many fish, have the best time ever. And he's like, ask me as many questions as possible. He's like, we get nervous when people aren't asking questions, especially if they're not asking questions and not catching fish. He's like, they want to be teachers, which is pretty cool. And as soon as I started asking questions and he's giving me feedback, I mentioned the one about slowing down and just some other ways I was rigging the baits. I mean, I just started catching more fish, have more fun. And of course, they got a big tip. So I think that was another big lesson is, just like in school, like, don't be afraid to ask. Most of the people truly do want to help you out, especially at this point. This is what they do for a living. So one, they got the experience, and two, the only way they pay their bills is if they get people on fish.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned earlier about just the efficiency on just even holding the rod, like as far as getting the most energy efficient type of setup. And I was doing this the wrong way, and so just in case y'all are doing this as well, so the proper way is when you're using these traditional reels is you have the handle's on one side. In this case, the handle is on my personal right side. And so I need to have the butt of the rod basically up underneath my right armpit. So that way I can kind of just use it as a lever system. And this is the way for the best power. And so I was doing it the wrong way. So because as far as, the crank it, don't yank it, when you hook into a big fish, especially grouper, you got to get them up as fast as you possibly can. You got to just be reeling and getting as much just power to get those big fish up before they get you rocked. And so it's holding like this is super important, and just start cranking as fast as you possibly can. No rod movement, just start reeling. And what I was doing is I had under the other armpit. And so I just wasn't able to reel as fast, and I wasn't able to get as much power into it as I would have. So like the first like half the day I was doing it the wrong way, and I was wearing myself out too. So I was basically using my bicep because I wasn't resting on the boat, on the edge of the boat. As I was just like totally wearing myself out, and I really wasn't even catching that big of a fish. So then the second day, catching way bigger fish, way more fish, and I wasn't nearly as tired. So it made a huge difference.
The other one too, I don't know if you can stand up a little bit and get back, but for your left arm, Dylan was using that like in his gut, like in his belly. And, I wasn't. I had my left arm kind of extended, and it was definitely using more bicep. Forearm was like on fire. And I'm watching him, and like he's literally got his elbow digged into his gut and using that as a lever. If he wasn't using,
I'll try it out here. So yeah, it was basically rod in the armpit, and then the left arm for the arm that's holding the rod. The elbow is basically digging into your side. That way, you're not using your bicep to hold it. You're just using the power of the rod, and it's just digging armpit into the side. So another spot that I'm sore.
Yeah.
After a few fish, you're not used to it, and then you feel it. Your body will let you know, hey, you're doing something different.
And the other one was putting your hand, instead of holding it like that, was putting your hand over. I noticed Rich was doing that. He was the oldest of all of us on the boat, and he didn't care. He's like, man, I'm going to be comfortable. So he was literally had the rod right on the rail, his hand that way, and man, it was using it as a lever, and he was
Yeah. So
pulling up.
yeah. And so for those who are just listening, yeah, it's handles with your knuckles up. Your knuckles up. This is the hand holding on the rod, knuckles up. Basically in between the rod and the line, versus from up and underneath where you're just having to get more leverage with your arm. So I was doing this too, because as you're doing the power cranks, the hardest part is just keeping that reel steady. And so holding it this way is much easier. And I was actually holding it with my finger over the reel just to keep it as steady as possible. Yeah, because man, those red snapper, I'll tell you what, those things, they're just so strong. And we were catching, they're all, I have to imagine they were at least 10 pounders or more for, I don't remember catching any that were even close to the minimum length. But unfortunately, it wasn't snapper season. We did let them go, but man, they fight hard.
That's one with Dylan.
Yeah, Dylan's a big guy. He's he's like 6'3" or 6'4", and that snapper still looks big.
Thing was massive. If you're listening on the podcast, definitely go check it out. And we're gonna start putting a lot of the we can't put obviously the course on YouTube, but we'll put little teasers and some of the cool footage on YouTube. You can check out what we were doing. And it's funny, and this is at least my perspective, and we're fishing with pros, guys who are out there all the time and have obviously some of the best spots marked in all of the Gulf. And it's interesting to think that red snapper have even been like considered is like, I know it was endangered, but like protected, and like there were some issues. I mean, I've never seen and felt so many red snapper on the end of my line. It was tough to get it down to the bottom in some areas. It was like, holy smokes, they're everywhere.
Yeah, like I said, yeah, like literally the last half of that second day, especially, I was literally trying not to catch them. Like they were, because they're so strong.
Yeah.
And we couldn't keep them. I was really wanting to fill up the freezer. And so that's why I went to that small bait. Right. Once I learned, okay, like a lot of them, they're feeding up pretty high. And if it's a big bait, they're gonna get it. And so that's why I wanted a little small piece of squid. And that's when at least the freezer started getting filled up. So yeah, it was fun. What a fun trip though. That was just a ton of fun and just constant action out there.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing I would say that I wish I had was bring a little beanbag.
Yeah.
Depending on the boat you're on, that would have been nice. I mean, that second day we went out pretty far, and it was 2 hour and 20 minutes, 2 hour 15 minutes to get out there each way. And man, I was watching. I was like, oh, I wish I would have had that beanbag. It was so nice.
Yeah, but if you're going on like a party boat, obviously can't do that. That's it just takes up space. But yeah, a private boat, if you're going offshore, those beanbags are clutch. And one thing they did that was pretty cool that I've never seen before is they actually tied two of them together, so that you could basically lay down and like nothing in your body is hitting the boat at all. So like, and they were actually up front, so even though it was wavy, they were just totally protected from the impact, just because they were just totally laying across. And I thought it was pretty neat.
Definitely a neat one there, Lukey. Remember, speaking of just like how tough these guys are, I mean, Rich, that dude has been fishing, I assume, his entire life. And I mean, did you notice, like, he didn't even have sunglasses on towards the end. He's still seeing stuff like before I did down in the water. He's like, oh yeah, he knew exactly what the fish was. Like, how are you, dude, if I go jogging at 7 a.m., I'm wearing sunglasses. Like, I don't know how people do it. I don't know if it's part of the Irish in us or what. But I was like, how is he out here in the middle of the ocean? It was like not a cloud in the sky. Sun was blazing, and he's just out there like nothing. You guys are tough.
Yeah, I didn't notice it until you mentioned something. I was like, man, yeah. I guess my eyes are total babies now. Or if the sun's out, I'm wearing glasses no matter what. And if I'm not, then I'm just doesn't feel right. I'm squinting. I can't see anything. That was tough. I'll say, you mentioned lures before. As far as the tip, and something that I've done wrong for many years, and I think a lot of us do who aren't doing the bottom fishing day in, day out, is especially the deeper water, the more important this is. But I think it is always important is just being very mindful of exactly how the bait is rigged, so that while you're dropping it's streamlined. It's going straight down. It's not doing a helicopter, because even if it's 30 feet and the bait's helicoptering and you're going straight down, that's just hanging your line up. That whatever bait that is, whether it's live bait or cut bait, it's just going to be helicoptering, and you'll have a total mess by the time you get down to the bottom, which is, going to have a worse presentation under the water. Plus, if you do hook up, the line's going to knot up, and it's just going to be a weak part of your knot. And so for like cut thread fin or just, a frozen thread fin, which a lot of people use, that tail is a basic rudder, right? And so if it's not perfectly aligned, that tail is going to cause it just to be helicoptering all the way down. So what they teach is to just totally cut or just rip the tail off.
Or bite it, or you can bite it.
Yeah, or you can bite it off if you're into that sort of thing. So take the tail off and hook it up in the nose, and make sure, like, if it is kind of frozen to the side, I literally straighten it out, like kind of break it the other way and make sure that it's perfectly straight. Hook it in the very front nose where it's aligned, kind of like rigging a soft plastic, and it's like total night and day. Like when you're dropping it down, it's not doing a helicopter. It's actually kind of going down. In some cases, it's actually kind of swimming down, which again helps get that strike as the lure's dropping, instead of having to wait all the way to the bottom.
Yeah, that was that I think that was part of Dylan, because Dylan had slightly different rules we talked about in the course, and one was still the whole crank it, but I think that was his number 2 rule, was the rigging is so critical. A lot of people think, oh yeah, just put a big old 6 or 8 ounce weight and drop it down, and he showed me an example of keeping the tail on, and that thing, you got to imagine how twisted that would be by the time it hit the bottom, it going down 200 feet.
Yep.
Especially when it was already frozen and a tail, it was like whipping around like a hurricane.
Yeah, and even with squid too, it doesn't matter what type of bait it is. It's not just for fish, but with squid, or when we're cutting up the value into strips, like they were clearly, cut in a way to make sure that they're like a plug. They're linear, and you put the hook and ideally put the hook in the kind of the skinny side, so that it just kind of torpedoes down. So yeah, huge difference. And again, like that was the most active bottom fishing trip I think I've ever been on, and it was just using those tips that they've been teaching. And again, it's like none of us. It's not just like one thing. Hey, just do this one thing. It's gonna totally change the results. It's just a lot of small things. We've only covered just a tidbit of them that when you do apply them, just makes a huge difference.
Yeah, one other one too was just how prepared you need to be and have people on your boat. Whether if you're going on a party boat, they're going to obviously have you taken care of. But if you're out there with friends or doing it yourself, just how many fish that you do catch that are either out of season or you've already limited out or whatever it might be, that you have to be able to quickly get those things released safely, either by venting. And that's all we did was just the venting. And I saw you towards the end, you kind of had it nailed down, scraping a few scales off, popping them, releasing that air, and then tossing them back in and make sure they get down to the bottom safely. But I can only imagine, because what we had 6 people on the boat the first day, and after that was just you and I and the basically 2 captains, Dylan and Anthony, and then Rich as the first mate. And we were constantly, who knows how many snapper we caught that we had to throw back. And it was just constantly puncture, throw back. And everyone had the little, basically looked like the end of a stringer, like a little device to puncture those things and release them safely.
Yeah, and to do it properly. So it's, and I learned a lot of where I was taking a little bit too long, and I wasn't going in the exact right spot. So it's to take some time to learn exactly how to vent the fish that you're venting, because once you do it properly, it is just so much faster. And they even just have it nearby, like have it in your pocket. What they were doing is they have a little vent tool that looks like it literally is just the end of a stringer, because there is a string still attached to it, and just have the string just sticking out of your pocket, so that as soon as you need it, you don't have to look, right? You can be holding the fish with one hand, just reach down, grab that string, and now you have your device for getting the air out, puncture it real quick, let the air out, and let it go. And once I started doing that and getting just a little bit of practice, I was doing it like 3 times quicker, right? And probably doing, and those fish, the quicker you get it back in the water, they will go straight down. There was no issues with them, floating up. And I think Dylan, he's big into conservation, and and he takes a lot of, the FWC folks out and just doing studies on catch and release. They're actually, that second day, there were almost going to be some FWC folks out there with us. Unfortunately, they couldn't go, but he was saying that even if you're doing everything properly, there's still going to be a mortality rate. I think it was like 11%, something like that. So it's really on us to make sure that, it's not going to be perfect, but just to make sure that as many as possible get back and can thrive after you do let it go. And so just getting good and getting efficient at doing the event properly, let them go quickly. Quick picture if you want one, get it back in the water. If you're going to get a picture, have somebody ready with a camera, right? You don't want to have somebody fumbling into their bag to get out. Just have a camera out there ready, have your vent tool ready, have everything you need just easily accessible, and get it back in the water as quick as possible.
The other thing I learned was that both us as inshore anglers and the offshore have a love-hate relationship with dolphin. And I'm not talking about mahi-mahi. We always talk about inshore fishing. Good news is if you see a dolphin or a pot of dolphin around, that usually means there's life, there's bait because they're feeding on something. Bad news is it can shut down the bite like that. And all of a sudden, we're out 70 miles and we're like, what is that out there? And next thing you know, it's like, it's a dolphin. Oh no, it's 3 dolphin. And they just sat around the boat. And Dylan's like, those things are so fast and they're so smart. Obviously if you're in a 42-foot yellowfin with, quad 300s, you could probably outrun them. But a lot of those party boats, you're not outrunning them. They'll literally just follow you everywhere you go. And they're sitting there waiting for you to release, those snapper or grouper or whatever it is. And we saw one. You hate to see it. It's a really nice red snapper that I'm sure anyone would have loved to come catch in June or July when it's open again. And man, as soon as we released it, it's going on the bottom, and that dolphin just comes out of nowhere. And next thing you know, it's got it in its mouth, and he's just sitting there laughing at us.
Yeah, and the bite noticeably shut down as well, just like inshore. So yeah, it's getting one of those things. Really, it's just nature. Can't do much about it other than in many cases I just see them and leave, and just go to another spot. But yeah, it's tough. Yeah, it was surprising how much of impact it makes for offshore, because we were in, I think at that point, 160 feet of water. So it was shocking. Like those fish on the bottom could sense that a dolphin was in the area, and they literally shut down.
Yeah.
So it's not just like flat. It's not just specific to flats where you're in like 2 feet of water and those fish can sense it and get spooked. Like they can sense those things from down below. That's like the ultimate predator.
Yeah, it was crazy.
So fast and so smart.
It's crazy. Well, anything else, dude? Any other big aha moments?
I think those are obviously there's a lot, and those were, like I'd say, the major ones. I think the ones that are probably violated the most, at least the ones that I was personally messing up the most. But yeah, it was just such a fun trip, and I always love fishing, and any type is fun. I do inshore most of the time, but it's just a lot of fun going out and just doing something new. And that's the good thing about fishing is no matter how much you do, like there's always something new to learn. And it was just a big treat to get out there and do that. Plus those fish are really, really good eating. So
yeah, we got a lot of fish to cook up. Speaking of something new, hopefully we'll do something similar, kind of a learning experience, if you will. So we've talked about doing this with our dad for a really long time, and that's to put the boat in that Lake Hatchinall. If you're not familiar with that, you can look it up. It's right next to Lake Kissimmee, basically dead in the center of the state of Florida, and go all the way, through the locks and everything, and Okeechobee, all the way out, and come back to our little condo in Placida near Boca Grande. So we're supposed to be doing that here next week, both weather permitting and water level permitting. We've kind of got some conflicting information about some of the locks not being open due to the water being too low. Right? It was too low. So we'll know more in the next couple of days, but that's going to be really cool. We're obviously going to take some fishing rides, and we'll have an opportunity to catch some bass, and then obviously coming out the river on the side of Florida, then hopefully catch an inshore slam. That'd be a pretty awesome trip. Yeah,
it should be fun. Yeah, and it'll be, I think it's over 200-mile total trip, and it's going to be at least one night, maybe two. And there's some multiple locks in there. We're trying to figure out exactly how we know whether they're going to be open or not. Supposedly, as the water level gets too low, in Okeechobee, they'll actually turn off some of the locks, and so we're pushing it as far as gas, and so if we just need to be very, very careful about not having to get down a certain point to where we can't come back if we have to, for gas purposes. So it should be a lot of fun. Probably take Otis too, so that'll be a treat to see what kind of trouble he gets into along the way, but it'll be a fun experience for sure.
Cool. Well, thank you all so much for listening, for subscribing. Subscribe to us on YouTube. If you're watching here on YouTube, subscribe on iTunes. We're trying to continue to be the #1 saltwater fishing podcast and eventually the #1 fishing podcast in the entire stinking nation. So thank you guys so much for all the support, all the love. Let us know who you want us to get on the show. And also, too, a lot of new cool discounts, a lot of new things that we're bringing to our insider members. We mentioned earlier, the Z-Man products. We're starting to do some new tackle deals. So we're listening to you. You guys tell us what you want. We're going out there and get you guys some awesome deals on it. And just as important, if not more importantly, teaching actually how to use them. And then most importantly, how to actually go find the fish based on trends, based on the biology of these fish. So check all of that out, including all the past podcast episodes. It's saltstrong.com/podcast. It's saltstrong.com/podcast. You can see everything right there. Lukey, thanks for joining me again, dude.
Good times.
Hopefully, are you going fishing today?
I'm gonna, I guess, kind of catch up on work. It's been email inbox is getting out of control, so I'll be focused on that. I'll try to get out this evening. That's my reward to myself. If I can get through all the emails in one day, I'll try to sneak out this evening. There's been some big snook. I'm actually down in Placida right now, and there's just from walking Otis across a bridge nearby, I've been seeing some big snook underneath it. So I might sneak out, get the paddleboard out, and try to hook into one of those.
Sweet. Cool. We'll post some pics.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. We out.